regarding the topic of creation and evolution, is this something have you studied evolution at all?
Yes, yeah, I had studied evolution at school, yes.
Same here when you take science courses.
Do you remember how Darwin defined evolution? Do you remember the words he used?
Well, I don't remember that well. I just know that there has been an evolution, that of course we've come from different different beings, and of course the human being has evolved from more primitive from primitive animals.
Okay. All right.
And the survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest that's a phrase that people remember a lot.
Was that
but
his?
the phrase? Yeah, well, yes, I believe it was in the Descent of Man book. The phrase I'm really looking for is descent with modification. Do you remember?
You're right.
Okay,
Yes.
so descent with modification, what that means is, the whole idea of evolution is that it all started with primitive life form, and then evolved into more complex life
Yes.
forms, all the way up to humans.
Same like us, we come from the apes, right?
Well, that's what evolutionists claim.
Yeah.
I'm not an evolutionist. I don't claim to be, I don't ascribe to that point of view. So, but defining words I think is very important, because a lot of people will define evolution as just simply change over time. But change over time, well, that helps in terms, for the evolutionists, it helps in terms of bacteria and viruses and those sorts of things. But the problem is it's really a nondescript definition. It's kind of like saying flowers are colorful objects. Well, there's all kinds, the stroller is a colorful object, our shirts, our coats, bicycles, buildings, or all kinds. Are they flowers? No. Well, things change. So a microphone changes, a camera changes, cars change. Are they evolving? No, they're changing by rust, and they're degrading and things like that.
Well, but
so
they're not alive, so I guess that would be the difference.
okay,
wouldn't
they're
it?
not alive. Yeah, I guess that's a good distinction in that regard. But change
They
over
cannot-
time
They
is
can
still.
never change for the better, I guess. But things that are alive might.
But my
Right?
point is that it's such a vague definition that I like Darwin's definition, which is descent with modification. Because when people are talking about evolution, that's really what they're talking about, is that whole idea of you're starting from a primitive life form all the way up to humans and all the descent in between. So now let's talk about science. So science, like the scientific method, can you describe the scientific method? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, in order to, that's how we know what we know. We need to test it, and
Yes.
so
Yes?
we need to be very objective in our ways of finding out the answers for whatever questions we have in whatever science.
Okay, all right.
And also there's different steps of doing a scientific method. I mean, you start by an hypothesis.
Yes.
And of course, you do experiments. I mean, there's
That's right.
a different process to get to the conclusion of whatever you want to find out.
Right. And so it's observable science. So now what I want to ask you is this question of, can you provide then some scientific examples of evolution using the scientific method, evolution that is descent with modification?
Well, that's what they, anthropologists and historians, they look at our indigenous cultures, how things have evolved, even, those are the sciences that take care of that.
Yes, they do. Okay.
I do believe, of course, it's observations. I mean, there's anthropologists who have found primitive humans, and by finding excavations and things like that, and they did find different.
Now we
different.
stand like this, but we used to stand like this or something, right?
Yeah,
Well,
and-
there are observations that we can make from the fossil record,
Yeah,
or
there you
from
go. Yeah, exactly.
from different skeletons and things like that. The problem with it is those observations are still based in the past. It's
Oh, well, yeah. I mean,
and because they're based in the past, the scientists that are looking at it through their own worldview of either confirming evolution, or if maybe they're a creationist and they're showing evidence in favor of creation. So that's the problem with those kinds of observations that I have, is that it's not the same as like with chemistry or in biology, where you can actually do
evolution has
testing.
taken forever. It's not that we were different 10 years ago. We've been different centuries ago. So it's
Yes.
more, the people who were around back then are not around.
And that's one of the things that I want people to understand, is that evolution, it's different than the branches of science. In that the branches of science are, you can make observations, at least in most of the branches. There are historical things, but with evolution, it's just it's really based on the assumption that evolution is true.
Well, but same thing with
interpreting things.
creationism.
I'm sorry?
We trust evolution because of science, and we trust creation because of faith, and we just find a way to, make them coexist. I mean, for me, I actually believe in both, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the expression inference to the best explanation? Have you ever heard of that expression? Inference to the best explanation. So there's a information scientist, Dr. Stephen Meyer, who wrote a book called Signature in the Cell. And in this really fat book, one of the things he talks about is inference to the best explanation. Scientists make inferences. We make inferences all the time. Mm-hmm. And what that means is we gather the data, and from the data we then look at it and analyze it and then make conclusions. So we're like, okay, I'm gathering the data, and then I'm going, oh, that's pointing to this direction, or this evidence is pointing to this direction. This is an area that I find to be in conflict when it comes to, again, this topic of evolution, especially in the universities, because they only have one possible cause for living organisms. Do you know what that possible cause is? Evolution, naturalistic causes. But there is another possibility, and that is that it was not by natural causes, but by design. That God exists, that He actually designed, and like from my point of view, that as described in the Bible, 6,000 years ago, 6 days, 24 hours, not a big deal, not a hard thing for God to do.
Okay, I don't know.
Well, but at the same
For
time,
that, we don't have evidence either. We need to believe.
But we're
that.
getting.
that's my point, because that's the same thing.
And that's where
like,
faith kicks in.
one of the things is like, of course, I don't know if evolution happened or not. You read about it, and that's what you trust because it's in books. Because
Yes.
people actually did the work in finding different things and coming to the conclusion that there was an evolution in the world and in humanity. Now, of course, I haven't done the work, and I cannot be 100% sure until you do the work. That's when you know that, yeah, this is true or this is not true, because that's what the whole scientific method is all about. Just I find out that this is truth or it's not truth, and of course, reading the Bible, it's kind of like the same thing. I didn't write the Bible. You know that, of course, God throughout the disciples wrote the Bible and all that. But at the same time, it's very similar. I mean, you are trusting what people years and years ago wrote about evolution.
And that's a good point. And I understand what you're saying. Okay. And this is really very common, is that people think, well, the scientists, they're the ones that have the answers, and the faith people, well, they have faith.
Well, no, and in the case for the Bible, historians have also looked at that, and anthropologists. I mean, I think you can look at it from a theological point of view, but also from an anthropological, historical, scientific. I mean, when they look at remains from the time of Jesus, I think it's also scientific. I think that is not just faith.
Well, I'm glad
there
to hear
is a
you.
lot of.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Right. I don't think it's just faith. We need to use a lot of our faith, but I think that we need to also be based on something, and we do have that too, right?
Good. Sure. What is your religious background? Are you
We're Catholic.
Catholic? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And so, I have a sheet with 5 different pieces of evidence in favor of creation, and I will be I want to give that to you.
Yeah.
So let me just bring up 1 or 2 of them. Okay. So your point is, I think largely, even though you agree that there certainly should be evidence for our faith. It's not just a matter of faith because it's faith, but there should be evidence for our faith. And so let me provide.
But at the same time, I think that a lot in our faith, we just believe because of faith. And a lot of things, when people who are not believers ask us, why you believe in this, or do you have evidence? We say, well, no, but that's faith. That's what,
And I don't dispute that.
I don't need, for some things it's nice to have the evidence, but I think that's the thing about faith. I don't need evidence to have faith. At
All
the
time.
end. No,
Yeah.
there you go. That's
Okay.
how we feel the hold.
I hear you.
Right.
For me, I grew up going to a church, and it wasn't until I was 21 that I had some different experiences that led me to another experience, which led me to kind of a surrendering period where I just surrendered to God, and I asked Him to come into my life and change me. But from that time on, I read this book called.
And see, that's more personal than science, I think.
Well, that part of it
That's
is.
the other difference.
But there is another factor in that. I'm trying to make this very brief. There was a fellow named Josh McDowell that I was hearing from, and he was providing some of this evidence that led to me making this personal decision. And then I read his book, Evidence That Demands a Verdict, which you would really appreciate because you're a lawyer and he was a lawyer. So in that, he's providing lots and lots of evidence in favor of Christianity. So anyway, going back to these 5 evidences, let me mention just one of them. And that is information. That there's a information scientist named Dr. Werner Gett, and he says wherever we find information, it's in 5 levels. So it might be on a T-shirt, it might be in a book or a computer, it might be in a car, anywhere you see information, or even our voices we're sending information. It's in these 5 levels. 5 levels are statistics, syntax, semantics, action or application, and purpose. And what's really amazing to me is that all 5 of these very clearly fit in DNA. So let me just talk about the second one, for example. The second one is syntax, and that's about rules. Syntax is like in the English language, you have rules. And so in DNA, you've got you know what a codon is? Codons are made up of 3 nucleic acids. It's never 2, it's never 5, it's never 7, it's always 3 nucleic acids. They also, genes begin and end with special codons, beginning and ending codons. Kind of similar to, in the English language, we have our sentences.
I didn't think it was going to be this long.
Yeah. I'll try and make it close it up here. So it's just that you think about the information in DNA, and it's just really, really amazing. And to think that kind of complexity could come about by natural causes and mutations and just an undirected type of thing. When I go back to the issue of inference to the best explanation, to me the best explanation is design for all that complexity inside DNA. And there's several others we could talk about, and as I said, I'll leave a sheet that talks about them. Do you have any questions about that?
No,
It was an interesting discussion.
Okay.
I just think there is, like she was saying, I think it's a little bit of both. I do believe there's a God, and God created everything. But I do believe that that of course, there has been an evolution and things have been changing over time. But God pretty much put everything in this, not only in this earth, but in this universe. And of course, things have been changing over time. But I do believe that, what the people from evolution have been saying, that that might have happened. But I do believe that there was a God that put all this.
I understand.
And he might have been overseeing all that evolution, right?
A lot. That is a possibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what I believe. It's there's a God that actually put everything in motion, and everything has been happening like that since then.
Right. Well, thank you for your time.
No,
I really
thank you.
appreciate
Sorry about,
you taking
I
the
thought
time
it
to
was
do
gonna be
this.
short and she's starting to get
Yeah.
I
restless.
completely understand.